Right. Could I just ask that if my voice drops and you can't hear me, just point upwards at the back. Sometimes when I get spiritual, my voice drops, Anyways, thank you, Maitri Bandhu, for that wonderful introduction. Oh, there you are, sorry. Maitri Bandhu asked big questions, and these are impossible questions to answer, as he said. And I think Buddhism does answer these questions. But the problem is that we don't have the minds to take in the answers. Yeah, we don't have the minds to take in the answers. Is life intrinsically meaningful? Yes, I presume. I could stop there, but I'm going to keep going anyway. It's a really difficult question to unfold and to really give a flavor of. You might remember Ian McGilchrist's 4 paths to truth. He talks about how we can get to truth through science, reason, imagination, and intuition. And in one of Maitri Bandhu's talks, he adds the body or doing those in an embodied way. And so there's lots of different things that we need to have. And we need to have a certain quality of mind to really be able to get a feeling for what this question is. Yeah. But the problem is that we don't always have that mind. And what we often do is we only maybe focus on 1 or 2 of these pathways to truth. So my background is that I'm a scientist. I studied theoretical physics in college and did a master's in the same as well. Crashed out of a PhD because of Buddhism, but I did do enough training in it to learn to be a scientist. And I love science. I love reason. But the problem is that when we come to questions like this, is life intrinsically meaningful? It's all too easy to be corralled by our reasoning faculty, our scientific function, into a simplistic or shallow answer, or we just, we get lazy and we come to an easy answer that has no nuance in it. So when we approach questions like this, reason isn't enough. We need just a very big consciousness to explore it. And we might even need things like contradiction, paradox, to come to the fuller truth. So I have a few quotes from Bhante tonight and 1 or 2 others. And the first one I wanted to say was an aphorism of Bhante's, where he says, the meaning of life is to be found only beyond life. The meaning of life is to be found only beyond life. Yeah. So I have no idea what he meant. It would be foolish to nail down what he did actually say there. I think, Bhante has loads of these aphorisms, and they're all really pithy aphorisms that, you could hazard a guess. You could say, well, did he mean something like it's only in death that we can know what life is about? Or maybe he's getting at something like, the meaning of life can't be perceived by what we normally experience in life, our normal mind in life. It could be any of those things. There's so many different interpretations that we could draw out of that pithy statement, that aphorism. The meaning of life is to be found only beyond life. Yeah. And for me, maybe this is what I really delight in terms of my scientific training. I love aphorisms like that. I love really juicy questions to chew on or to turn over in your mind. They're a bit like everlasting gobstoppers, if you know that film, where every day when you keep sucking on them, there's a new flavor emerges and something points more deeply at the nature of mind. So I think so much of the Dharma is staying with these really good questions and, maybe translating them or finding ways that they get activated in you. But I do have to say something about if life is intrinsically meaningful. So let's just look first at meaning. So even the word meaning is very difficult to understand, to say what it is. Yeah. In terms of its definition, it tends to mean something like if something has meaning, it is of significance or it is worthwhile. It's sufficiently important to be worthy of attention. That's another way of looking at it. So you're really asking, is life significant? Is life worthwhile? Yeah. And interestingly, the word for meaning is from the word mean, which, if you go back to the Indo-European languages, comes from the same word as mind. So you could say the nature of mind is the nature of meaning as well. For example, the word manas, which is in some of our names here, is a word for mind. It comes from the same root as meaning. So perhaps the question becomes, is there something in life? Is there something essential in life? Something sufficiently important that we should give it a lot of weight? Is there something that is of meaning, significance, and worthiness? Maybe that's what the question becomes. And it's intrinsic to life. It's not just in our life, but in all life. In your life, in your life, in your life, in all life that we meet. It's not just particular to any one of us or any number of us. So I remember being struck very much by reading A Survey of Buddhism, which is Bante's kind of classic book. And in that he says, at every stage of the spiritual life, we are faced by the necessity of making a choice between either of two opposites, on the one hand, and the mean which reconciles the opposition by transcending it on the other. I'll read that again. At every stage of the spiritual life, we are faced by the necessity of making a choice between either of two opposites, on the one hand, and the mean which reconciles the opposition by transcending it on the other. So to paraphrase it a bit more, what Bante is saying is that again and again and again in one's spiritual life, one finds oneself coming up against these opposites, that you could say even they're extremes. And the spiritual path is to trying to find the middle way between these two extremes. The middle way, it's not just the halfway point between them, but something that unifies them, transcends them, in a way renders those extremes irrelevant. Yeah, renders those extremes irrelevant. So in a way, and he sees the middle way as something we continuously need to be open to. And I thought this was I've always found this a really interesting reflection. So when I'm in any situation, what extremes am I tending to here? And what is the transcendent middle way? Yeah. Just to give a small example, I remember many of you are on your first or second retreat. And I remember on my second retreat, finding it at times wonderful and at times hellish. Yeah. And someone asked me on the minibus on the way home, how was the retreat for you? And I just had to look at him and go, I can't answer that question. And what became clear on that retreat is that I just went to extremes of joy and extremes of almost despair at times. And the gap between them might only be half an hour. Yeah. So maybe some of you are experiencing this already on the retreat. So that's a really interesting question then, isn't it? So I think what we have to do when we're presented with these ways of going is ask, what is the middle way here? Yeah. And the middle way for me there and that, it was quite practical really. It was not to take too much pleasure in the joy and not to take too much despair in the hard times, and try and find something that went beyond them, a deeper sense of equanimity, a deeper sense of commitment to the ideals of Buddhism, where it didn't matter if I was happy or sad. Yeah. So it kind of transcended the two. So that's a very practical and everyday, you could say, example of the middle way. But I hope it gives you a sense of what I mean by moving to these extremes. And because we have this tendency to literalism, and because we tend to fall back too much, perhaps at times, in the rational mind, I thought it might be useful to use this paradigm for looking at meaning and I think we can learn a lot by looking at the extremes we fall into, or the unhelpful polarities we fall into, and then trying to find the middle way. Yeah. And this is something the Buddha did back in the day when he was practicing. So the extremes that were present in his life, if you know the life of his enlightenment, on the one hand, one extreme was self-mortification, where people would be extremely, practice these very extreme practices of body crushing, crushing the spirit of the body, not eating, sitting in freezing cold mountain streams and so on, to try and crush the body into submission. And on the other hand, the Buddha's early life, if you believe the stories, was one of complete pleasure and opulence. So the Buddha had to go and find the middle way between complete pleasure on the one hand and complete, you could say, self-denial on the other. Yeah, so it's complete self-indulgence on the one hand, complete self-denial on the other. And his middle way, was the spiral path, the law of karma, as we'll see in a little while. Or another extreme that is traditional in Buddhism is, do we have a soul that's everlasting and unchanging? Or is there nothing after death? And there are extremes as well that are very common. And the transcendent middle way there is seeing that there is something, but it is not something that we can pin down. It's ever changing, it's ever flowing. There's not nothing, but there's not nothing either. Yeah. So again, the middle way is always subtle and hard to understand with our everyday mind. Or the other classic one in metaphysics is just the question of existence and non-existence generally. And the answer to that is conditioned co-production, the middle way. So I'll come back to that again in a few minutes. But I do find this a really interesting, like I think so much of my Dharma life has been finding really good questions to reflect upon. Yeah. One I've really enjoyed reflecting on as well over the years is the question of free will. Do we have free will? Yeah. And the extremes we can move to here would be, on the one hand, we have complete free will, and on the other hand, we're completely predetermined. We're like a wound-up clock that is just playing itself out. Yeah. And neither of those are subtle enough. Neither of those are true, I would say. If you think you have complete free will, then you're probably not looking at just how much you're led by your desires, by your compulsions, by your addictions. And so much of the time as well, I don't even know what I want anyway. And I kind of find myself doing it and rationalizing it afterwards. I wouldn't call that free will. Yeah. So the middle way here perhaps is something of the fact that as we practice, as we develop a more fit mind, we tend to find that we have more choice. Yeah, we tend to find we have more choice. But even that is not nuanced enough, because as we develop a fit mind, we become less and less dependent upon a self. We become less and less referenced in a self. And we start to experience ourselves in ways beyond the self. So what does free will of the self mean anyway there then? So the question of free will doesn't quite fit anymore in some ways. So the middle way is not just the midpoint between the two. It's a subtle path that is always dramatically beyond the original terms of what's been laid out. I hope that's clear from that example. And you could say the whole Nature of Mind project, the whole project of Buddhism, is trying to find the middle way to wisdom between these extremes that life will throw up. So when it comes to whether life has intrinsic meaning, it is useful to look at the extremes and then go from there. So on the one hand, we have the idea that life has no meaning. Yeah. And if that's the case, then life is simply probably just going to be about gaining pleasure, having pleasure as much as you can, avoiding pain until the lights go out. Yeah. Which is a rather bleak picture of the universe. Or another version of this might be something like life simply has the meaning we ascribe to it. Yeah, life simply has the meaning we ascribe to it. So this would be the more existentialist position, I guess you could say. And while it's probably a more positive vision than life having no meaning, it's deeply problematic as well, because it leads to me having my meaning and you having your meaning and you having your meaning, and who's to say which is better? Yeah, and that leads to all kinds of other problems. And then on the other hand, the other extreme, well, the one that occurred to me, I'm sure there's lots of different ones that could come out, but maybe this is my background, not as a scientist, but as a Roman Catholic, is this kind of sense that everything you do, God has a purpose for you. You know, your purpose is laid out in every moment. Everything is significant and laid out for the purpose of your life. Yeah. And that just feels like a prison that's entirely not useful as well. Because I think sometimes things just happen for no purpose, you know. So I find it interesting to reflect that those are the kind of things we can go to, and neither are subtle enough to be to do justice to the big questions that we're trying to ask. Yeah. And neither of them feel in tune with Buddhism, actually. So the middle way here, I think, in terms of meaning, well, it's the answer to all the middle ways. It really is the Buddha's teaching of conditioned co-production. But I'll break that down a bit more. So I want to talk a bit about the Buddha's teaching, the middle path, the middle way, his central teaching in Buddhism of conditioned co-production. So he said that things do not arise randomly. They don't arise arbitrarily. This is one other extreme to be avoided. And on the other hand, they're not completely mechanistic, not completely predetermined. this was a very strong view in Europe, by the way, after the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, that the prevailing view in scientists at the time was that we live in a clockwork universe that we're discovering the rules of. In fact, there was a feeling after Newton's time that we'd pretty much answered everything. Yeah, so be careful of that kind of attitude as well. Yeah. So instead, the Buddha says that there are these recognizable patterns and trends and tendencies in reality that we can recognize. And things arise, things pass away in dependence upon a vast network of conditions. And most of you, I'm sure, will have come across this teaching, which comes originally from Buddhaghosa, but has really been drawn out by Bhante and Subhuti in the last few years, which is the teaching of the niyamas, or kind of laws, you could say. So I will explore them in a moment, but just to mention that they're the physical level of things, of conditionality, biological, simple psychological, karma, and dharma. So I want to look at these now for a little bit, but I want to bring a scientific point of view to them as well, which is that I found it very useful to bring to this idea of emergence. So emergence is this phenomena in science where something emerges that is rather unpredictable from the conditions that lead to it emerging. You see it a lot in biology, and one of the ways of looking at it is that it has qualities that are there, and those qualities, none of those qualities are present in the sum of the parts that led to this emergence. Yeah. So it's a modern way of thinking, relatively modern way of thinking. It's part of evolution, really. And Buddhism traditionally never really talked explicitly about this or about evolution, although I think it is there quite implicitly. Yeah. So we start off with the physical level of the universe. The rules that I would have studied and Yanavacha would have studied in college as part of our theoretical physics, the laws of gravity, an ordering in the universe at the physical level, the physical level below the biological. And then once a certain complexity and order has come about at the physical level, something new and unpredictable emerged. And we still don't quite know how fully, which is biological life. Something new emerged out of that. Yeah. As new and as different as living cells are to sand. Yeah. So if you think about the difference in living cells and sand, who could have predicted living celled creatures from sand or minerals or whatever? And then once this biological level, or as this biological level reaches a certain level of complexity and order, something else emerged, something quite unpredictable as well in a way, which was simple consciousness. Yeah, and this was a radical departure as well. And this would be it's as radical as the brain of a dog is to an amoeba. Yeah. And then once this simple consciousness has reached a certain level of complexity and order, something new again emerged, which was the self-aware individual, self-consciousness, the being which could be aware, but also aware that they are aware. Yeah. And this is something as radical as, someone on retreat, cultivating mindfulness, the mind that they have compared to the sheep out in the field there. I was watching them earlier run around. So it's quite a radical departure and something quite different. Yeah. So this has emerged out of a certain degree of, complexity at the level of simple consciousness. And we've all heard this before, but then where this becomes something beyond the level of science is that once the level of self-awareness reaches a certain level of refinement, complexity, order, something else emerges, a way of being which isn't rooted in a sense of self, which doesn't need to have a tightly defined sense of self to operate and doesn't have the restrictions of self to operate in the world. Yeah. And this is as different and as new as the mind of an enlightened being as to someone spending all their days on Instagram or Twitter. Yeah. So it's a radically new departure. It's something completely different of a completely different order. Yeah. And who knows, maybe there's further emergence beyond this. I'd like to think that this is as far as we can see, and there's probably even more happening than this. But with our limited minds, that's as far as we can see. That's the horizon to which we can currently see. But maybe there's endless emergence. Who knows? Yeah. So you can see already then that from the interstellar dust that formed the Earth and came together billions of years ago, all the way through to the mind of the Buddha, there is in the universe this recurring phenomena of something radically new emerging from something lesser, you could say, or a certain, something completely unpredictable emerging when the conditions are right. Yeah. And so we live in a universe which trends towards the realization of higher and higher states of consciousness, which are more and more in tune with the way things are. So already, I think we can see that there is meaning inherent in the universe. Yeah. And just as at the level of physics, at the levels of biology, there's the laws of thermodynamics, gravity, biology, and so on. At the level of karma, we have laws as well, and probably at the level of dharma as well, but they're probably a bit too hard for me to see right now from where I am. But we have the great law of karma at this level of self-awareness, the level of the individual and their actions, their intended actions. So this is the level of ethics, which I want to spend a little bit of time on. So most of you will have heard this already, but just to remind you again that ethics in Buddhism is, ethics is our intentional actions. So we talk in terms of, not in terms of good and evil, but in terms of skillful and unskillful. So a skillful action is an action which opens up our consciousness, helps us be more connected with life, with other people, moves us towards enlightenment, helps us feel happy, open, and free. Yeah, they're actions that are based upon love, connection, empathy, generosity, awareness, kindness, wisdom. And then unskillful actions are actions which are based upon the opposite of those: hatred, cruelty, selfishness, ignorance, and so on, greed. And they're actions which tend to close down our world, which tend to cut us off from each other, which tend to make our world a slightly more dark and more paranoid place. I can really recommend Subhadramati's book for a thorough explanation of all this if you want to read further, Not About Being Good. And the thing, particularly having come from a Catholic background, the thing I love about Buddhist ethics is that it puts the responsibility back on you firmly. You have to decide. You can't tell from the outside particularly. Maybe you can if they're like killing someone or something, but it's very hard to tell a lot of the time if an action is skillful or unskillful simply by its external expression. It is the intention, although the external expression is important too. And it is a skill. So it is a skill. The analogy Subhadramati makes, she's a great cook, is cookery books. You know, you can read about cooking, but until you do it, until you acquire the skill of cooking, you won't get better at it. And until you live out an ethical life and try and base your actions more and more upon those positive states of mind, you won't really learn what ethics is. And if Buddhist ethics boils down to one thing, it's about being less self-preoccupied. Yeah, being less self-preoccupied, being less self-orientated, getting caught up less in your own dramas and taking in other people more. Yep. So, and all of this is described in the law of karma. So the law of karma simply says that actions have consequences. Skillful actions lead to positive consequences. Unskillful actions lead to negative consequences. And karma simply means action or willed action. Yeah. And we have the karma, the action, and the fruit. And it's very, very misunderstood. Karma doesn't mean predestination. It doesn't mean punishment. It doesn't mean destiny. It doesn't mean fate. It doesn't mean that everything that happens to you is your fault, all those kinds of things. I remember one time Madonna had said something very unfortunate about karma, that things that had happened to people, it was because of something they'd done in a previous life. And usually when this happens, your local Buddhist centre will get a call. And I had to go onto the Irish National Radio and explain how this wasn't the case. It was my 5 minutes of fame. And but there's so many different levels at which things can operate. You know, it could be that you feel unwell because of your karma, but it could be that you're simply sick. Yeah. I remember a friend of mine one time being on a solitary retreat, and it was quite intense for him. And he felt like he was processing all this pain. And then he went to the doctor and he discovered he just had a collapsed lung. So, and he'd been working with this for 2 days. So you can never tell. You can never tell. You have to be very careful ascribing things to karma. That's a true story, I'm afraid. So that's the first thing. You can't blame people for their misfortunes. The next thing to say is that all of our actions includes our thoughts and our intentions, and our emotions are themselves actions as well. And you'll see this on retreat. Your intentions can have a powerful effect on you, particularly on retreat. And then the third thing to say is that these are natural laws, just to really bring that home. It's just like apples fall from trees, karma, actions have effects, yeah? And the Buddha didn't invent karma any more than Isaac Newton invented gravity. Yeah, he just described how it works. Yeah. But wouldn't it be interesting, though, this might be another reflection for you, we take the law of gravity very seriously indeed, yeah? If you want to see how seriously you take it, just go up and climb up on top of the roof there and stand at the edge and see how you feel, yeah? And wouldn't it be wonderful to take the law of karma as seriously as we took the law of gravity, yeah? And yet, karmically speaking, we're probably jumping off roofs all the time, you know, or staggering very near the edge of the precipice all the time. We don't take it really seriously enough. Anyways, just another reflection to think about. And another way to look at the law of karma is that we're constantly re-becoming. Yeah, we're constantly re-becoming. At every level of the niyamas, at every level of those, the physical, biological, simple consciousness, karma, dharma, at every level of those, there is constant change. Yeah, and it's easy to see this in the physical universe. We can be a bit more resistant to seeing it in our bodies as we get older. And you can on retreat really see this in your mind as well, just how much everything is always changing. And so we're always re-becoming. Our minds and our hearts are never still. And we're always re-becoming. And the world around us is always changing. That is also re-becoming all the time. And so in a way, the Buddha, when he talks about conditionality in its full breath, is talking about a huge river of conditions that carries us on in our lives. And it's very, very difficult to fathom this. One needs an enlightened mind really to see this. One needs a really fit, broad mind to see this. And a lot of the time we're swept along by unseen currents in our lives, karmic and otherwise. And when it comes to karmic, I'll just mention briefly that there are two predominant ways this re-becoming occurs, yeah? So the first, and Bhante Sangharakshita has talked a lot about this. So the first one is that we can go round and round with the same old habits predominating. This is cyclic conditionality. Particularly, I think it's about where we're blown around by the worldly winds, being preoccupied with pleasure, trying to avoid pain, trying to gain things, trying to avoid loss. And no sooner do we gain one, but the other one, we find ourselves at the other one. And anything we try and hold on to slips through our fingers. And you could say that this re-becoming is the re-becoming again and again and again in different shades of a grey unhappiness, yeah? So re-becoming again and again and again. But then there's the other type of re-becoming where we can bring an appreciative and open mind to the fruits of an appreciative and open mind, yeah? So we bring an appreciative and open mind to the happiness we feel on retreat, or the joy and spaciousness we feel in the mindfulness of breathing, or the love we feel in the metta bhavana. And if we keep bringing an appreciative and open mind to an appreciative and open mind, it keeps deepening and ever deepening and ever deepening. And this is what Bhante called the spiral. And this spiral can deepen and deepen and deepen. We can re-become and re-become and re-become in a better and better way until wisdom arises, and even then it continues to enlightenment. You know? So I find this a really interesting reflection. I'm always looking for good reflections, as I say, and I think one of the most interesting reflections one can do, this might just be me, but is just keep asking yourself, are you the same person now you were a time ago? You know, so are you the same person now? It's only last night that we arrived on the retreat. Yeah, it's only last night we arrived on the retreat. Are you the same person you were last night when you came here after negotiating the car, the bus, the trains, the flights, as you are now. Yeah. And this one might keep you awake, but when your head hits the pillow tonight, will that be the same person who wakes up tomorrow? Hope I don't freak you out enough too much there with that. And what continues and what changes? What continues and what changes? Yeah. I want to read a bit from this lovely book that this wonderful book that Maitri Bhante put together. There's a great section from Bhante. It's in chapter 18, Nihilism and Eternalism. I'll just briefly say that. Read it out. He says, even in this present life, leaving aside the question of rebirth, you are a process. You are constantly changing. You are not the same person today as you were yesterday. Well, you are neither the same nor different. The truth of your existence can be explained neither in terms of an unchanging existence, nor in terms of a non-existence, nor in a combination of the two. From instant to instant, you are a mental state that arises on the preceding mental state, and in dependence upon your present mental state, there arises a future mental state. There is continuity with no identity, or rather, the continuity does not consist in the conservation of an unchanging element. There is pure process, there is change, but there is nothing that changes. There is rebirth, but there is nobody who is reborn. There is attainment of enlightenment, but there is nobody who attains enlightenment. So you might want to read that again, yeah, and reflect upon it, yeah. So, and Vidyamala tomorrow will be talking about the most mysterious instance of this is when we die. Yeah, I'm not going to touch on that in this talk. But from day to day, yeah, it's a mysterious question. Consciousness, our minds are like a flame, and a flame is never still. It's always arising in every moment. Yeah. Is a flame ever the same from one moment to the next? And so in a way, our minds and we ourselves, we're dancing flames rather than solid pieces of wood. And this continual rebirthing, rebecoming isn't particularly controllable. Yeah, it's not particularly controllable. We can shape and influence the kind of person we will become in the future through the law of karma, through looking at the intentionality of our actions and trying to act skillfully. I think the law of karma is not so useful most of the time, trying to find out why you're feeling the way you are now looking back. There is some use to it there, but really where the law of karma is useful is in this present moment, what do I need to do to set up a creative mind in the future, to create a skillful, fit mind to see the truth in the future? So what do I need to do right now in this moment? Yeah. And that's what Madonna got wrong, I'm afraid. The other thing to say is that it's not just that we are rebecoming. Karma isn't just about that either. Karma also talks about, or at least for me, it seems like karma also talks about how we are constantly creating the world that we exist in. Yeah, we're constantly creating the world that we exist in. While not everything that happens to us is karma, how we relate to the world creates our world, creates our experience of the world. So you might have heard of the old fable of the person at the crossroads, and there's a traveler who comes to meet them. And this might be one of Aesop's fables. I'm not sure where the source is, but the traveler asks the person at the crossroads, "What are the people in the next town like?" And the person at the crossroads says, "Well, what were the people at the last town like?" And the traveler says, "Well, they're all out to get me. They're trying to swindle me of my money, and they didn't seem very friendly." And the traveler goes, "Oh, right, they're like that at the next town as well." And then the next traveler comes along a little bit later, and he asked the person at the crossroads, "What are the people in the next town like?" And the person there asked the traveler, "Well, what were they like at the last town?" And the traveler says, "They were decent folk, actually. You know, they hadn't much, but they were open. We could connect with each other, and I had a rich time there." And the person goes, "Well, they're like that at the next village too." Yeah. And it's a very simple story, but I think it communicates something of the nature of how we really underestimate just how much we create our world with our karma. So karma really means, as well as intentional action, that we're sensitized to that in the world which reflects our karmic tendencies. Yeah. So we see in the world, we move towards in the world, we highlight in the world, we focus exclusively on in the world, and we feel most comfortable in the world, that which reflects our own karmic dispositions and tendencies. Yeah. And in a mysterious way, we even attract that in the world to us, which reflects the karmic dispositions of our mind. And we tend to block the rest of it out. Traditionally in Buddhism, when we die, we karmically choose to come back with a human body because that's what's familiar to us. That's what freaks us out the least, yeah, in the face of the complete spectrum of what's possible. So even by choosing a body, we probably close ourselves down to such a narrow band of what's possible to experience. Yeah. So that could be something else you could reflect upon. And the Buddha says that we dramatically underestimate just how much we create our worlds. We dramatically underestimate just how much we create our worlds. And he talks about how our worlds are mind-made, mind-led, and responsive to the actions of our mind. Yeah. So our worlds are mind-made, mind-led, and responsive to the actions of our mind. And again, I think that story of my first or my second retreat, where at times the retreat was heaven and at times the retreat was hell, illustrates that very well. Yeah, illustrates that very well indeed. But so we live in a kind of sometimes this can be really tiresome because you just see just how endlessly we create this world of our karma. Yeah, but the good news is that no matter what world we end up creating for ourselves, there is something that we can always depend in that, and we can always depend upon the law of karma. We can always depend, no matter what kind of world we create for ourselves, we can always depend that if we act with a skillful intention and avoid acting with an unskillful intention, that we will make things better. We will develop a more fit mind. We will create a more enjoyable and connected world for ourselves, and a world that is more in tune with how the universe really is. Yeah. So we can always depend upon the law of karma. It's completely dependable. Skillful actions will lead to greater freedom. Unskillful actions will lead to less freedom. Yeah. No matter what kind of world you create for yourself. And the more and more we can create a fit mind in the world that comes out of that, the less dukkha, the less suffering we'll experience, the more connection with others we'll experience, and the more, in a way, our worlds will overlap with each other, and we can work together more fully and experience connection with each other as a spiritual community. Yeah, and hopefully you get a taste of that on retreat. In a way, the world that you create with your mind becomes less important, and you start to tune into something deeper and richer and shared together. Yeah. And perhaps this is one of the reasons, to paraphrase Bhante slightly, he talks about how wisdom is much more likely to arise when we're practicing together than on our own. Yeah. But it's not just that. It's also that as we keep practicing, as we keep purifying ourselves at the karmic level, something new can emerge. So you remember earlier, emergence. And to throw in another little aphorism of Bhante, he says, no accumulation of karma can get you to nirvana. Yeah, no accumulation of karma can get you to nirvana. So that's not meant to be discouraging, by the way. It is important to accumulate good karma, or to accumulate a pure and fit state of mind. But what he's saying is that after a certain point, something else begins to emerge, the dharmic level of things, a mind less and less rooted in you doing certain things, and more about just aligning with the good in the universe, you could say, to put it very poetically. And this state of mind is as far beyond your everyday mind as your everyday mind is beyond those sheep in the field. Yeah, but we can start to experience threads of that emerging, even on your first retreat, even in your first meditation. Yeah. So, anyways, to start to wrap up, so we're talking about does life have intrinsic meaning? And we're trying to avoid the extremes that life has no meaning on the one hand, or life only has the meaning that we give to it in our minds, in our imagination, or on the other hand, everything, an objective meaning given by an authority. So karma, the law of conditionality, the law of karma points to a different kind of universe, something intrinsic in the universe where when the conditions are right, something unforeseen can emerge, something of the deepest meaning and significance and value can emerge. This is what Buddhism is pointing to. It's not really an answer as such. There's no answer, this is the meaning of life. But what it does point to is where a life of meaning lies. It points to a kind of a better way into the question of meaning in the universe and where we can move towards it and where we can find it. Yeah? And we can trust in karma. We can trust that, the Buddha did teach this to his followers. And it's a natural law in the universe. Just as apples fall from trees, this kind of deeper and deeper emergence is fundamental to the universe. So I wanted to finish by saying that we can, whoops, sorry, everyone on the line, you got to kick up the microphone there. We can test this out this week for ourselves in this retreat, yeah? So everything in Buddhism is meant to be tested out for yourself. You're meant to bring it into your experience. And I wanted to share a story. It's a science story. I love these science stories. So back in 1971, the astronauts of Apollo 15 landed on the moon. I think it was one of the last moon landings, and they did a completely unnecessary and wonderful experiment. It was a lovely piece of scientific theatre, and it harked back to Galileo in the late 16th century, where he was positing that gravity, any mass will fall at the same speed on Earth. Yeah, you've studied physics as well. You know this one. And the experiment, the story goes that they were dropping different sized cannonballs from the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. They probably actually never did that, but that's the story. So as a piece of theatre, the commander, David Scott, did his experiment on the moon where he took a hammer and a feather and he dropped them at the same time. And they both fell to the surface of the moon exactly at the same speed and hit the ground at the same time. Because on the moon, there's no air. So there's no air friction to get in the way of the feather falling at the same speed as the hammer. And demonstrating that Galileo's theories were true. They knew that anyway. Again, it was just a piece of theatre to illustrate something. And you can watch this on YouTube, but not on this retreat, but when you get back. And it's a very grainy video. And at the end, you just hear David Scott saying, "How about that?" in a really amazed voice. Or to translate it from the American, I think he's saying, "Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible?" Yeah. So we're like astronauts on this retreat. We've gone to the moon. Yeah, we're in this beautiful moonscape. I would love to go to the moon and see the moon, by the way. I think I've always wanted to be an astronaut, but this is the closest I've got. But going to the moon in your mind. But this week we're in a magical moonscape where the normal frictions of life aren't there. Yeah, and we can really try these things out. We can really try out the law of karma, just as those astronauts in the Apollo 15 were trying out the law of gravity, even though they knew the right answers already. Yeah, we can look at the workings of karma operating in our lives, be they as light as a feather or as heavy as a hammer. Yeah, and we can set up the conditions for some kind of deeper meaning to the universe that's intrinsic to the universe to unfold. And again, isn't that incredible that we can do that? So, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for a very careful exploration of karma. There's so much to say about karma. I wanted just to reiterate what you said there at the end about, well, we can just try it out, actually put it into practice. I mean, the law of karma is basically saying that actions have consequences. And remember that Buddhism is saying that some of the most important actions are the actions that happen inside your head. Yeah. So basically it says that your actions matter. Yeah, your actions matter. And you can really watch that here on this retreat, that your actions matter. How you meditate matters. How you talk to people matters. How you talk to yourself in your head matters. Your actions matter. And because they matter, your life is intrinsically meaningful. Yeah. But let's we're just going to rearrange the room very slightly, and then we're going to conclude our evening with a short ritual, because I want to make sure we keep opening up to this mystery of mind. And we're going to open up to that in a short ritual in just a minute. So you might want to, if you need to go to the loo, just do that now, and then we'll just start the puja. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah. Namo Okay. So as I said, we're going to finish the evening with a ritual. We're exploring the nature of mind, which is, it's hard to think of a more profound thing to explore. And we're not trying to get to an answer. We're not trying to find what the answer is. We're trying to keep opening, we're trying to keep open to the nature of things. So puja, ritual, really is, it's an as-if practice. We're practicing a new way of imagining our mind in relationship to the world. What we tend to imagine is that our mind is the epiphenomenon of our brain, that matter creates consciousness, that and easily from that arises a world that is meaningless, in which death is the end. As soon as the brain dies, death is the end. Out of that whole sort of narrative, we end up with a kind of world where we think of ourselves trapped in this mind. And yes, we can make the most of it. We can do as well as we can with it, but it'll be destroyed on the impact of our death. That is our deep view, really. Buddhism is saying that's just not true. That's just not true. So what a ritual is doing, and what this ritual is doing, is imagining ourselves quite actively in another vision of mind. So in this ritual and in all ritual, you're imagining that you can just let go of yourself and open up to a new kind of mind, the mind of the Buddha, not just the Buddha, but all the Buddhas on the shrine here. That we live in a universe that is conscious, that has purpose, that has intrinsic purpose and value, even a universe of love. Hard to imagine though that is. So it's an as-if practice in which you imagine opening up to a universe that is loving, wise, purposeful, wanting to create benefit. So we're not saying whether that's true or not in some sort of abstract and absolute way, but you're opening up to that possibility and you're acting that out in an as-if kind of way. You're lighting candles to the shrine, you're bowing to the shrine. All of that is symbolic of opening out to a mind that goes beyond egotism, a mind that goes beyond the everyday, a mind that reaches out to a compassionate universe. But you're not trying to think about that, you're just acting it out. And we're going to be acting that out again, like we did last night, by doing verses in call and response, very simple verses, followed by a mantra. Oscar, I'll get you to chant the mantra again, the same as yesterday. And I'll bring us, some people were singing there's a second part of the mantra that you don't need too many voices for that second part. And I'll bring that second part in as well, but we don't need too many voices. Mostly you need the voices to follow Oscar. So we'll just do that. We'll just do what we did last night. We'll do a threefold puja very simply. We'll chant the mantra. I'll encourage you to come up and make offerings. But the real puja is happening in your mind, a sense of really actively suspending this idea of us cramped in a brain that is going to be destroyed on impact, and opening to a world of love, a world of the Buddhas, a world of mysteries, and acting that out by bowing to the shrine. Nobody quite knows what the source of bowing is, but one tradition is that it was what you used to do. You used to show your neck to the king so they could cut your head off if they wanted to. So in other words, bowing is a position of complete defenselessness. Yeah, it's where you really admit, I don't know. Yeah, it's where you really admit, I actually, for all my great ideas about stuff, I actually really don't know. And you touch your head to the ground, and you're completely defenseless in the world. And because you believe, in this case, in this ritual, that the universe is full of love and full of consciousness, yeah, and you're bowing to the mystery of that. You'll never understand that. I'll never understand that. We're acting out this bowing to the mystery of that. There's something sacred, isn't there, just about touching your forehead to the ground. It seems to me to be one of the great human actions, is by touching your forehead to the ground, you're saying, I really don't know. I've got all these kind of ideas, but I really don't know. I want to be open to all kinds of possibilities beyond my views, and I want to act that out. I want to act as if I live in a universe of meaning and value and love. And then, surprise, surprise, you'll start to experience yourself living in that universe. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Very, very simple way of finishing. And then see if we can, the mantra will fade out at the end, as it usually does. And what you're wanting there is the mantra fades out and you fade out into complete silence. So if you need to sort of move at all, you're always moving whilst the mantra is being recited. And so that's another good reason actually to make an offering, so you get to move. And then see if the mantra can die down to complete stillness. And traditionally in that stillness, the devas make their offerings to the shrine. And devas are basically the Buddhist equivalent of angels. So that in the stillness, in the rich stillness at the end, in this beautiful environment, in this beautiful atmosphere, all these angels will come down and make their offerings. And we need to sit in complete silence while that's happening. And if you just have a bit of an imaginative sense that that's happening, you can feel it deepen the atmosphere. We do live in a world of magic. It's just that we've closed ourselves to it, and we can open ourselves to it again. Yeah. So let's just do that. So when you're ready, if you'd like to close your eyes and just again prepare yourself. So just as we did before, coming back to your body. Anything genuinely imaginative is arising out of your body, not just out of your head. And just see if you can imagine that by doing this ritual, you're opening up to powers, forces, mysteries that are beautiful, that are purposeful, and that are loving. And that we're acting that out in this ritual. threefold puja, opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha.
We reverence the Buddha,
The perfectly enlightened one.
the perfectly enlightened one,
The shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma.
We reverence the Dharma,
The teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
that inspires and guides.
that inspires and guides.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha
We reverence the Buddha
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it.
with body, speech and mind
With body, speech and mind
until the end.
until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its aspects.
the path in all its stages.
The path in all its stages.
We aspire to study,
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha
We reverence the Sangha
and aspire to follow it.
and aspire to follow it.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
As one by one,
As one by one,
we make our own commitment,
we make our own commitment.
an ever widening circle.
An ever widening circle.
The Sangha grows.
The Sangha grows.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer flowers.
we offer flowers.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too, like flowers,
Our bodies too, like flowers,
will pass away.
will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer candles.
we offer candles.
To him who is the light,
To him who is the light,
we offer light.
we offer light.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
The lamp of Bodhi,
The lamp of Bodhi,
shining within our hearts.
shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer incense.
we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
The fragrance of the perfect life,
The fragrance of the perfect life,
sweeter than incense,
sweeter than incense,
spreads in all directions
spreads in all directions
throughout the world.
throughout the world.
Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha.
Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha. Om Muni 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 Swaha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya 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 Muni Swaha.
So leaving quietly when you're ready, and remembering we're in silence until the end of lunch tomorrow.